So welcome to our training today on the basic care requirements for infants and toddler caregivers. This is an updated video with the latest version of the Child Care Minimum Standards. Instead of doing two different webinars with basic care requirements for infant caregivers and then another one with basic care requirements for toddler caregivers, we're going to do this together today based on feedback that I have received from many of you. Most of your infant caregivers also work with some toddlers, and most of your toddler caregivers also work with infants, especially with the way infants and toddlers are defined in the Child Care Minimum Standards. They cross over quite a bit. So in everyone's best interest, we're going to do these two groups together, and I think it's going to work out really fantastic. So before we get started, if this is your first time joining us for a 10 at 10, those of you that are live, you can ask any questions or make any comments over in the comment section on Facebook, and we can go ahead and get those questions or comments addressed. If you're watching the recorded video of this, there are a few different ways that you can interact with us. Up in the top right-hand corner of our website, you can send a direct message with any questions that you have. You can send an email, you can give us a phone call, and we can answer your questions. Or if you need more information beyond the scope of the training material, we are here for you. We always want to make sure that you've got a clear understanding of the content and you don't have anything just lingering in the back of your mind. This training has been approved by the Texas Early Childhood Professional Development System, otherwise known as TechPEDS. So please make sure that your personal TechPEDS ID number is on your Tim the Trainer portal before you complete your assessment at the end of the course. That way your training certificate will automatically be uploaded into your TechPEDS account, and that just makes life really, really fantastic and wonderful. Just one more reminder, per the Child Care Minimum Standards, trainings must be completed in a reasonable amount of time. So basically, you should not be completing more clock hours of training in a single day than the total number of hours that you worked in that day. You definitely should not be completing more clock hours of training in a single day than there are working hours in a day. So we just want to make sure that you're in compliance with child care regulations, with Texas Rising Star, with Texas Workforce Commission, and all of those wonderful regulatory agencies that we got to comply with every single day. So our objectives for today is we want to make sure that everyone has a comprehensive understanding of the Child Care Minimum Standard expectations and give some tips and suggestions on how to comply with these rules. We want to understand what is developmentally appropriate for each of the children in your care as we're planning activities, as we're interacting, as we're engaging. Knowing what is appropriate for that age group is really important for the success of you and your program right there. And then also, we want all participants to know and practice health and safety guidelines as outlined by Health and Human Services. So those are our three really quick objectives for this training today. So, kind of moving into the Child Care Minimum Standards, before we get to the actual basic care requirements for infant and toddler caregivers, I just wanted to touch on a few of the terms and definitions that it's important for everyone to understand, because as you see these in the standards, they can be interpreted differently. And so the terms and definitions are always really critical for everyone to review and understand, whether you're a teacher, a director, whatever your role in your program. Make sure that you do a comprehensive review of the terms and definitions. Typically, anytime I see a situation where either a teacher or a director is having a disagreement with their child care regulations inspector, it's usually due to somebody not understanding a term or definition. And child care regulations has done a very fantastic job over the last 9 years cleaning up these terms and definitions so that everybody's on the same page and we don't have interpretation issues. All right? So the first thing you're going to see here is where it's going to talk about the definition of a bouncer seat and the definition of restrictive devices. We have two particular standards that we'll talk about today that will directly relate to children being in bouncer seats or children being in restrictive devices. So again, wanted to make sure everyone really understood what these items are. All right. So for example, children cannot sleep in a restrictive device. Children cannot be placed in a restrictive device as a form of punishment. Those are the two big ones that you're going to see as we go through this material. The other definition, just for clarification purposes, that we want to see here is an infant is defined as a child birth through 17 months. All right? Where a toddler is defined as a child 18 months through 35 months. So you may call a child a 2-year-old, but licensing is still going to refer to them as a toddler. The other confusing part for some people is an infant is a child birth through 17-month-olds. So you may have a situation where you've got a group of children that are 12 to 18 months, and you may call that like a young toddler room, but as far as licensing is concerned, that is still an infant room. So when you look at the basic care requirements that we're about to go over, those 12 to 17-month-old children have to meet all of the infant care requirements, regardless of what you call that classroom. Okay? So those are important definitions for you to understand as well. Standard 746-309 is also extremely important for infant and toddler caregivers to understand. This came from a piece of legislation that was passed by our lawmakers here in Texas. But basically, if you receive any type of deficiency that is related to safe sleep practices, all right, you could be assessed an administrative penalty, which means there would be a fine that your center has to pay. But then also any deficiency related to safe sleep practices, you have to send a letter that will be provided to you by child care regulations out to every single family enrolled in your program, letting them know that you have been cited for safe sleep practices. Okay? And that's not good. We want to avoid that right there. So what they've done here under Standard 309 is they have listed out the 7 standards that are related to safe sleep practices. And you will notice that the majority of these are directly related to infant and toddler care. So there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders to make sure that you're in compliance. Making sure that your cribs meet the crib safety guidelines as outlined by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Same thing with your play yards. If your program is using a play yard right there, making sure that children are not sleeping in a prohibited device right there, that they're not sleeping in a restrictive device, that children are sleeping on their backs until they are able to roll over, okay, that you're not swaddling infants, and then making sure that children's heads are not covered. So all of these are really important. Probably the biggest deficiency that we see is children sleeping in a restricted device. So if you have a child in a bouncer seat, if you have a child in a swing, they need to be placed in their crib before they fall asleep, not after they fall asleep. All right? Now you're going to see where the standards do say If a child falls asleep in a restrictive device, you have to put them in their crib as soon as possible. That comes down to an interpretation issue. What is the definition of as soon as possible? That could get really messy. So again, that's why when you're coaching and mentoring, I always like to say, the children need to be placed in the crib before they fall asleep, just to avoid any type of issue right there. All right, let's go over some really quick training requirements before we get into the basic care. So for pre-service, anyone that has less than 2 years of experience working in a licensed child care program, you have to get 24 hours of pre-service training. If you're going to be working with children younger than 24 months, then your pre-service training must include recognizing and preventing shaken baby syndrome and abusive head trauma, understanding and using safe sleep practices, and preventing sudden infant death syndrome, and understanding early childhood brain development. So this needs to be included in your pre-service training for all of your newer employees. Now, a common mistake that people make with this one is they only have their infant caregivers complete the shaken baby, SIDS, and brain development training. But if you notice right here, it says any caregiver providing care for children younger than 24 months. So that would include some of your toddler teachers. See, this is where I was saying earlier, the definitions don't complement each other. Your infants are birth through 17 months. Your toddlers are 18 to 36 months. But right here, it's anyone working with children younger than 24 months. So don't make that mistake of only having infant caregivers complete, these additional topics. It is also some of your toddler teachers. Same thing with your annual training requirements. So once again, if you are working with children younger than 24 months of age, you must have at least 1 clock hour of annual training in the same topics right here. So recognizing and preventing shaken baby syndrome, abusive head trauma, safe sleep practices, sudden infant death syndrome, and early childhood brain development. So again, this would be for those infant and younger toddler teachers. All right, this is what you came for right here. What are the basic care requirements for infants? Now, look at the very first thing listed right here. Care by the same caregiver on a regular basis. Children must have consistent caregiving. All right, that secure, healthy attachment is so critical in the first 2 years of life. So we've got to have the same people, the same adults in that classroom as much as possible. If you are in a program that has a lot of turnover of staff, all right, you could receive a deficiency for this. All right, and it's not just for child care regulations, but it is for the development of the infant, okay? So I always like to tell people, if you're gonna work in an infant classroom, then you've got to make like a 1-year commitment, all right? And it's not for me, the operator, it's for the children. They've got to have that consistent caregiving. Even whenever I'm enrolling a parent in an infant classroom, I will usually always say something like, hey, mom and dad or guardian, we want to make sure that we're the right fit for you and your family. Because once you make a commitment to our school, you got to give it a 1-year commitment. And again, it's not for us, it's for the child, okay? So they've got to have that consistent caregiving. That includes individual attention with the infant, playing with them, talking to them, cuddling and holding. It's the joint attention that we talk so much about in so many of our trainings. You might want to check out our video, and we just recently updated it on engagement techniques in early education classrooms. We talk a lot about joint attention, that eye-to-eye contact with the child. And that's what we're talking about right here with number 2. Holding and comforting that infant who is upset. That is, again, creating that secure attachment style. Again, we have another video on our website, Understanding Attachment, that will give you more information on that right there. And I understand that, working in an infant classroom, you've got a 1-to-4 ratio in most cases, and that's a lot of children that you're responsible for, at one time. As we have joint attention, as we build healthy attachment, then we're teaching the child that even though I may not be there at this exact moment, I will eventually get to you. All right? So holding and comforting that infant who is upset, or creating that trust that you will eventually get to them, that's what we're going for. Giving prompt attention to physical needs such as feeding and diapering, focused on that health and safety right there. Talking to infants as they are fed, when their diapers being changed, when they're held, constantly naming objects, singing, doing rhymes and poetry. Again, it's the language development, and pay close attention to the facial expressions, all right? We want to create what's called serve and return. Serve and return, where the adult is communicating both verbally and non-verbally to the child, and the child returns, that communication. So that's very important for their development right there. Always making sure that your environment is clear of choking hazards and other hazards in the classroom. And of course, infants are never left unsupervised, even if they are placed in their crib. All right, you can't leave them unsupervised. Kind of moving on right here, when we talk about the arrangement of the infant area, make it possible for caregivers to hear and see all infants at a glance, all right, so that you can intervene when necessary. Now, when we see right here on number 1 under 2403, you have to be able to intervene when necessary. That means that you have to be mobile, right? You have to be able to get up and move pretty quickly, especially when you're working with some of the toddlers or the mobile infants right there. Make sure that you have the open floor so that you have safe floor time for them to do their tummy time. Separate infants from children more than 18 months, from the youngest to the oldest child in the group. We talk about this when we talk about ratio and group sizes. When there is a child younger than 18 months of age in a particular group, there cannot be more than an 18-month difference between the youngest and oldest child. Now remember that 18-month variance rule only applies when there is a child in the group younger than 18 months. A very common question that I get from caregivers and directors: how far apart must my cribs be from one another? How far apart must cots and mats be from each other? There is no actual distance listed in this book, all right? So you can see right here on number 4, you must have your cribs far enough apart so that one infant may not reach into another crib, and you must provide caregivers with enough space to walk and work between cribs, cots, and mats, all right? So that's what you're looking at right there. Your cribs, cots, and mats, are they far enough apart so that your caregivers can walk and work between these items? Okay, so that's what you're going to look at when deciding that distance right there. And then make sure that older children do not use the infant area as a passageway to other areas in the building. Okay, so that infant area needs to be completely separate from everyone else. All right, 2405 is going to talk about furniture and equipment that you must have in your infant area. Look at number 1, an adult-sized rocker or chair. All right, this is a very commonly missed item, especially for those 12 to 17-month-old children. So even in those quote-unquote young toddler classrooms, you still need to have the adult-sized chair or rocker. Now, the type of rocker that you have, whether it's a traditional rocking chair or a glider, that is completely up to your program to decide. Just follow the manufacturer's instructions. Or it doesn't even have to be a rocker. It can just be an adult-sized chair. Okay? You decide what is best and safest for your individual program. You do need to have an individual crib for each non-walking infant that's younger than 12 months of age, and then an individual crib, cot, bed, or mat that is waterproof for each walking infant and non-walking infants 12 months of age and older. All right, so we get a lot of questions on that one right there. Your hand washing sink does need to be separate from your food preparation sink. So in most cases, you're going to need to have 2 different sinks in your infant area, one for hand washing and one for food preparation. Now, I have seen situations where you may only have one sink in your infant area that is designated for hand washing, and then a pitcher of water is brought into the infant room for food preparation. Okay, that would work as long as it's designated. You've got a clear policy and process in place, but in most cases we just have the 2 sinks in the infant area. And number 5 is going to talk about making sure that you have a sufficient number of toys to keep the infant engaged in activities. And we're going to talk about what specific toys you need to have here in just a little bit. 2407 is going to talk about safety straps. All right, so if you use high chairs, swings, strollers, infant carriers, bouncer seats, or other similar types of equipment, they must be equipped with safety straps that are fastened whenever an infant is using the equipment. So we want those children to be safe. We do not want them rolling off of a diaper changing table. We don't want them falling out or climbing out of some of the other equipment used. So kind of always make sure that you're using those, that they're in good repair, all right, that they're clean and healthy, but that's really important for you. 2409 is going to talk about what specific safety requirements must your cribs meet. You kind of see this right here on the screen. You also have it listed in your child care minimum standards. Basically, your cribs should have a crib compliance certification that is kept on file. We usually keep ours in our compliance binder, but if the crib comes with a certificate of compliance, then you're usually in pretty good shape. If it does not have a certificate of compliance, that usually means it's not meeting one of these criteria. This is where I always like to remind people, anytime you're buying furniture and equipment for your program, always make sure you're buying furniture and equipment from a supplier that specializes in commercial use. All right, that specializes in licensed child care facilities. That way you're getting the furniture and equipment that is safe and healthy, and it's going to meet all of the guidelines. If you go to a local retail establishment, then you may be getting cribs or play yards that are not in compliance with the standards. When you are using a crib, make sure that it is sanitized before a different child uses it. All right, and if that crib is manufactured with drop gate downs, that the child is not left in the crib when the gates are down. My recommendation is don't buy those. All right, that's the best way to avoid that problem. If your program is using play yards, you can see the specific guidelines for play yards. We don't see these very often. I have seen some in some situations, but if you are using that play yard, you can take a look at Standard 2411 and see what needs to be met in your specific program. Stackable wall cribs, these are some items that we saw back in the 1990s, early 2000s. They are kind of coming back and they're becoming really popular once again. But if you are using stackable wall cribs, then you're going to use those based on manufacturer's recommendations. Make sure that they meet all of the crib certification guidelines. But they are something that can be used. Honestly, y'all, I kind of like these. In my opinion, they tend to be safer. They're easier to keep clean. They give you so much more floor space in your room so that your room is just not looking like it's full of cribs. I'm a big fan of them, but they are a little pricey. And you got to get past the appearance of, the stackable wall units. But the amount of floor space that you have, it's really, really nice. So it's something to keep in mind right there. All right, now 2415, y'all, this is a big one right here. So specific types of equipment that you are prohibited from using in your infant area. All right, anything that has been identified as unsafe by the Consumer Product Safety Commission and the American Academy of Pediatrics, and you are responsible for keeping up with this. All right, so you can go to the Consumer Product Safety Commission's website, cpsc.gov, and you can subscribe to email alerts. Make sure that you filter it to where you're only getting children's products. And then that way, anytime there is a recall or an item that is deemed unsafe, you'll be able to know to remove that from your program. Your director has to sign off on that. Licensing will come in and check that. But that's a really good thing for you to do. All right, baby walkers are prohibited. Baby door jumpers with the bungee cord, those are prohibited. Accordion safety gates are prohibited. Choking hazards, obviously. So, you can go to the old golden rule of using the toilet paper tube. And if it's a toy that can fit through the toilet paper tube, then that is prohibited. If it's too big to go through that tube, then it's something that can be allowed in the classroom as long as it's safe for other reasons. Bean bags, water beds, foam pads, all of these items are also prohibited in your infant area. B as in boy is also really important for you to look at, except for a tight fitting sheet. All right, your cribs and your play yards have to be bare for your infants younger than 12 months of age. So basically nothing in the crib but the baby. All right. Now, there is nothing in this book that addresses pacifiers. So you can have a particular policy or process for your program on pacifiers. I also encourage you to talk to your individual local licensing inspector for their interpretation of pacifiers, but it is not mentioned anywhere in this book. Usually, if it's just the pacifier that belongs to the child, you're going to be okay. However, if it does have the strap that attaches to the child's clothing, that could be a strangulation issue, and those are typically not going to be allowed. If you have a crib mattress cover that is being used to protect against wetness, then it has to be a crib mattress cover that is designed specifically for that particular mattress. This is my favorite couple of pages in these basic care requirements. So, what activities must I provide for an infant? And I like to take the activities that have to be provided for each of the different age groups and cut and paste this right into the job descriptions. All right, here is what is expected, for activities and engagement for these particular age groups. You can also take this and kind of use it as a scavenger hunt. So as it mentions different items that should be included in your program, go in there and make sure you've got these items in your classroom. It's really awesome because, number one, you can make sure that you have enough equipment in all of the different domains to keep the children engaged and interested. But it also teaches everyone that there is a reason why we have certain piece of equipment and certain toys, all right? So this is really awesome. And I always encourage directors, go over, the what activities must I provide for each of the different age groups. Go over this upon hire with your new employees, and at least once a year or in a staff meeting, kind of go over these requirements. I think this is good. All right. So the first thing you're going to see here is opportunities for outdoor play when weather permits. Okay. So even your infants need to have that daily opportunity for outdoor play. Now for an infant, it's going to be based on how much can the infant tolerate. All right, how much time outside can the individual infant tolerate? So these are going to vary right here. Now when we get to the toddler group, they must have 60 minutes of outdoor play each day. All right, and you can divide that up into 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon. But for the infants, it's how much can the individual child tolerate each day. Multiple opportunities for the child to explore outside of the crib, and when they are not seated in a restricted device for more than 15 minutes, unless the infant is eating or being transported. So number 2, B as in boy. Highlight that one, circle this one, prick your finger and put blood on it. But y'all, this is a big deficiency right here. That if you do have restrictive devices in your program, swings, bouncy seats, high chairs, they are not seated in that restricted device for more than 15 minutes. All right? Unless they are eating or being transported. Big deficiency. We see people cited for this one all the time. Opportunities for physical activity, including supervised tummy time. That includes reaching, grasping, pulling up, creeping, crawling, and walking in a safe, clean, uncluttered area. We want that small and large muscle development. I just updated a training on physical activities in early education environments. You might want to check out that video too. One of my favorites, actually. Number 4 is going to be opportunities for visual stimulation through nonverbal communication. So examples of age-appropriate equipment would include large pictures of faces and familiar objects. Remember, the most fascinating object to an infant is the human face. The younger the child, the bigger the picture. So we want nice, big 8x10 pictures of human faces and other familiar objects to that infant. Simple, soft, washable books and toys, unbreakable mirrors, mobiles attached to the crib, visible from the baby's position, brightly colored crib sheets is really helpful to them. Opportunities for auditory stimulation, so verbal communication, soothing music, and musical and sounding toys. Now, let's talk about number 5 for a second. Something that is really popular these days are the sound machines, right? Y'all, if you have sound machines, they need to be used at a soothing and comfortable sound level. They should not be too loud. And so many times I walk into classrooms, whether it be an infant room or an older room, and those sound machines are too loud. All right. So if you are using those, they need to be at a soothing and comfortable level. Okay. Watch that one right there. Okay. The sensory stimulation. So surfaces, fabrics, texture toys, washable dolls, toy animals, all of that good stuff. Opportunities for small muscle development. So busy boxes, rattles, teethers, grasping toys, shaking or squeezing toys, cloth toys. And then opportunities for large muscle development. So blankets or quilts for floor supervised tummy time. All right. Crib and play gyms, a variety of lightweight balls that are not choking hazards, pillows or supportive equipment for those infants that are learning to sit up. Moving on now to the specific requirements for feeding your infants. So children birth through 6 months of age must be held while feeding them. All right. Holding infants over 6 months who are unable to sit unassisted in a high chair or other seating equipment while feeding them. Number 3, high risk deficiency right here. Never prop a bottle or support a bottle with an object. This is a big no-no right here. All right. So it has to be held with a human hand. All right. Provide those regular snacks and meal times for infants who are on table food. Make sure that infants are being held for feeding and that they are fed in a safe manner. Label bottles and training cups with the infant's first name and initial of their last name. So we want to focus on privacy right here and make sure we don't have any privacy violations. Number 7 is another big deficiency. We see this one all the time. Never allow infants to walk around with or sleep with a bottle or training cup. And remember, this includes your toddlers right here. Never use a hand washing sink or diaper changing surface for food preparation. And make sure that you're sanitizing your high chairs after they are used. You are required to have a written feeding instruction for all of your infants that are not ready for table food. Okay, so get those infant feeding instructions from the parent or the child's health care professional. And it does need to be reviewed and updated every 30 days. Okay, now if there has been no change in the infant feeding instructions, you can just have the parent sign and date it that says no change. You don't need to have a brand new form filled out every 30 days unless that's what you choose to do. All right, but usually if they just have them sign and date it that there has been no change, that will work also. Make sure that you are providing a supervised nap time that is based on the infant's own pattern of sleeping and waking periods. So this is very different than how we do it in other age groups right here. But for the infant, it's based on his or her own pattern of sleeping and waking. Okay. Infants must sleep in a designated crib, cot, or mat unless you have a sleep exception form that has been filled out by the child's health care professional and signed. Okay. And then you may allow a child to remain in their crib for up to 30 minutes after waking up, as long as the infant is content and responsive. Personally, I think that 30 minutes is too long. I would get them out of that crib sooner than that, okay? But that's what we have right here in the standards. 2426 is going to talk about infants sleeping in a restricted device. They must not sleep in a restricted device unless you have a sleep exception form that has been filled out and signed by the child's health care professional that they do need to sleep upright due to a medical condition. You can download a copy of the Safe Sleep Exception form from Child Care Regulations website, but it does need to be signed by the child's health care professional, and it does need to be kept on file at the facility. Okay? Infants always need to be placed in a face-up position when sleeping. Once they are able to roll over on their own, we always like to make a nice little sign that says something like, my name is Leslie and I can roll over. And we'll put that near the crib. That way, if you do have a child that is on their side or they've rolled over on their tummy, if licensing were to come in, it's very obvious that that was done by the child, not by the caregiver. But that's kind of how we indicate that right there. That's really helpful for you. And the parents like it. It's super cute. You are prohibited from swaddling an infant. All right, so this is again something that has been written into law by our legislators. So no swaddling is allowed right there unless you have a sleep exception form that has been filled out and signed by the healthcare professional. Make sure a child's head is not covered while in the crib or blanket. Now remember, if they're under 12 months of age, they should not have a blanket in the crib. But over 12 months of age, if the child pulls the blanket over themselves, you got to make sure that you uncover it. And we see that happen quite often, unfortunately. So make sure that head is being uncovered. You are required to share a daily report with parents for each infant in care. That daily report must include times that the infant slept, times and the amount of food consumption, the times of diaper changes, the infant's general mood of the day, and a brief summary of the activities that the infant participated in. This can be done written or electronic, whichever your program chooses. The electronic version just has to be accessible for Child Care Regulations upon request. All right, but it can be written or done electronically. Now, if you are using tablets to do parent communication, the health, safety, and supervision of the children is your number one priority. Updating that tablet is not your number one priority, okay? So we're having a lot of issues these days with supervision-related incidents because caregivers are more focused on updating the electronic form of communication than they are maintaining the supervision, health, and safety of the classroom. So that's always your priority, is the health, safety, and supervision of the children. Okay, you might want to have a conversation with your leadership team at your facility on how this is handled to maintain safety, supervision, and health. All right, kind of moving on to the basic care requirements for toddlers. And this is pretty quick right here. But for your toddlers, your 18 to 36-month-old children, routines such as diapering, feeding, sleeping, indoor and outdoor activities are maintained as closely as possible. Children must have routine. They've got to have structure. They've got to have that predictability. And once they transition into the toddler group, that routine is what's going to give them a felt sense of safety, right? And they have to learn routine and structure. It's not something that comes natural to them. Once again, you can see care by the same caregiver on a regular basis. So these children need that consistent caregiving so that they can build that secure, healthy attachment. Individual attention given to the toddler, including playing, talking, cuddling, making sure that we're holding and comforting those toddlers who are upset, and making sure that your environment is free of objects that could cause choking for those children. When we talk about how must you arrange the toddler area, The space must have enough room to allow both individual and group time, and a play environment that allows the caregiver to properly supervise the children as defined under 1205. The furniture and equipment that must be included in a toddler area. We want age-appropriate seating, tables, nap and rest equipment. Don't want anything too big. We don't want them falling out of a chair or falling and hitting a table. So it needs to be age-appropriate. Furniture and equipment that is manufactured for 18 to 36-month-old children. Enough popular items available so that toddlers are not forced to compete for them. This is going to help with aggression. This is going to help with biting, right? We have to teach them and we have to practice sharing, all right? This is a skill that has to be learned, and it's going to take a lot of practicing to do that. Containers or low shelving that are accessible to toddlers, so that they can safely obtain them without adult intervention. So remember, lots of dumping and filling. Lots of dumping and filling in a toddler room. It's one of the ways children learn to explore. It's the cause and effect. So I know a lot of toddler teachers get really frustrated with the dumping of the toys. Y'all, they are learning whenever they do that. But once they dump, we have to teach and practice the filling. Okay, so turn it into a game, turn it into fun, but this is just part of their development right there. If you are using bottles and training cups in your program, it needs to be labeled with the toddler's first name and initial of their last name. It needs to be cleaned and sanitized between each use. It is used for drinking and feeding, but never allow toddlers to sleep with or walk around with a bottle or training cup. Even if the parent gives the cup to the child when the parent's dropping off, all right? We have to be able to communicate with parents that once they come into the classroom, they can't walk around with that cup, all right? So even though the parent's the one that gives it to them, it doesn't make it okay. Moving into the activities that must be included for a toddler. So again, we're talking about your 18 to 36-month-old children. Opportunities for outdoor play when weather permits. So that's the 60 minutes of outdoor play each day. Opportunities for thinking skills and sensory development. Opportunities for small muscle development. You can see some examples right here on the screen. Opportunities for large muscle development. Opportunities for moderate to vigorous active play. So once again, toddlers must be given 60 minutes of active play each day. All right, this can happen outdoors or it can happen indoors. And you can see some example here of music, songs, simple games, dramatic or imaginary play that encourage movement such as dancing, running, climbing, stretching, walking, and marching. This is again very important for their physical development. If you are unable to go outside due to weather conditions, you've got to make sure that you still have these opportunities for moderate to vigorous active play even when they are inside. Okay, so that's going to be important for your planning. Make sure you have rainy day activities ready to go for those moments when you spontaneously can't go outside. Opportunities for language development. So lots of language being learned at this phase of development. So we want age-appropriate equipment, age-appropriate language, because they're going to repeat anything that they hear. Opportunities for social and emotional development. We have a lot of pro-social development that's happening at this phase right here. So they're starting to learn friendships. They're starting to learn empathy. They're starting to learn compassion. So we want to support that with age-appropriate activities revolving around social and emotional development. Opportunities for self-help skills, all right, such as toileting, hand washing, and self-feeding, and we need to support them with those opportunities. Remember, our job is to encourage, our job is to model. Our job is not to shame or belittle or make the child feel indifferent. So lots of modeling, lots of encouraging. And for your toddler age group, you are not required to share a daily report with parents. However, there does need to be opportunity for communication, opportunities to exchange information about things that have been observed, comments or concerns. That opportunity needs to take place. A lot of the programs that I work with still provide written daily reports for this particular age group. That is exceeding expectations. If that's something that you choose to do, you can do that. Just know that with the standards, it's technically not required as long as you've got that ability to communicate with the parent. Once again, I just want to stress, if you are using electronic forms of communication, the health, safety, and supervision of the children is your number one priority. It is not updating and communicating with parents on a tablet or app. All right? So we want to make sure that the children are safe throughout the day. All right, that completes our training today on basic care requirements for infants and toddlers. If you have any questions about this material, or if you need more information beyond the scope of the training, you can go to our website, timthetrainer.com. In the upper right-hand corner, you can send us a direct message. You can call us. You can email us. We are here to support you and get you the information you need to be successful. All right, you can go ahead and complete your assessment now, and we'll see you again for another training very soon. Bye.